When something changes, what is gained or lost? What remains the same? Why did the change happen? And what caused the change to happen? We can ask these things about objects, events, choices, or anything else in reality. How do we analyze reality? Let's ask Aristotle. Today I will briefly introduce Aristotle's Metaphysics and Epistemology. In particular, we're going to discuss the four causes from Aristotle's physics and then carry that discussion into the metaphysics. We'll also briefly discuss some aspects of Aristotle's epistemology. First, let's talk about the four causes. What persists through change? And where does change come from? The pre-Socratics began investigating the nature of cause. I encourage you to see my pre-Socratics presentation before watching this one, as it explains where the pre-Socratics first begin asking about the nature of reality and causation. They want to know what persists through change. This is before a solid discovery of the conservation of mass and energy. These are the kinds of questions that lead to that conclusion. But perhaps there are other things as well that persist through change. Let's see. Aristotle says that the nature of cause is so fundamental it can't be proven. Any proof rests on premises, but there is only one way to demonstrate the most fundamental principles. So if you're trying to prove the existence of causation, what could you possibly use that is more fundamental than cause? Because in order to prove something, you need to appeal to something that is more certain. But there are a few things more certain than causation. One way to demonstrate causation, though, is reductio ad absurdum, which is to say, let's just, for the sake of argument, see what happens if we deny that causation exists, or if we deny that different aspects of causation exist. We will show that if you deny these ideas, then it will produce absurd conclusions. To start out, how do we learn cause exists in the first place? Through induction. Since cause is so fundamental, the only proof is to show how a denial of cause or of the types of cause will be absurd. I will first explain Aristotle's four causes in the physics, then summarize his response to the pre-Socratics in the metaphysics. The four causes are four ways to ask why. Let's look at this chair as our object of inquiry, for example. Why do I act? What is my goal? Let's say I want seating for a classroom. We already have the first cause. The final cause is, in Aristotle's words, the end or that for the sake of which something is done, including the tendencies natural to things. So this is to say that my end or my purpose, my final cause, is to provide seating for a classroom. If we were talking about some different kinds of things, let's say a seed, a plant seed, let's say the seed of an apple tree. The final cause also includes the tendencies that are natural to this thing. So the final cause of an apple seed is to become an apple tree. Why does this thing exist? These are the kinds of questions that lead to the final cause. Final cause asks, why does it exist? What is it for, specifically? What is its purpose? This is the most important cause because it will determine all of the other causes. For example, I want efficient seating for up to 40 students in the classroom. Right? That's the example we're going off of right now. Still talking about a chair. Next, I'll ask, what shape should it be? Or why is it that shape? The answer is determined by the final cause. I want chairs, preferably stackable and durable. What is a chair? The formal cause is the form or the original pattern, the account of what it is to be such and such. So essentially, the formal cause is asking, what is it? What is it? It's not a hamburger. It's not a knife. It's a chair. Well, what makes it a chair and not a hamburger? Your answer to that is going to be the form. What shape or structure does it have? Of course, more specifically, we do not simply want just a chair, but we want a chair that is for the purpose of efficient classroom management and classroom use. So we may have other aspects, other specifics that we want to include in the form. They're going to be essential and accidental properties of this thing. For example, essential properties are the necessary properties that define what the thing is. All right? What defines this being a chair and not a table or a bench? For example, it has a seat, it's stable, it's suitable for one person. If we lose one of these essential properties, then it becomes something else. For example, if it no longer has a seat, then it's just, I don't know, a pile of poles or a pile of wood. If it's not stable, then it does not fulfill its purpose, its final cause. It is simply a pile of trash on the ground. Or if it's not suitable for one person, if it's suitable for two people, it becomes something more like a bench or a couch. All right? And it will have a seat. If it doesn't have these, it's not a chair. It might instead be a bench or a table. All right? A table does not have a seat, but it is stable, and it may be suitable for one person, say, if it's an individual desk. Accidental properties are the unnecessary properties of something. For example, green or metal or plastic or armrest. All right? These things could be present or they could be absent, and it's still going to be a chair. A chair must have color if it's matter, if it's physical, but it's still a chair no matter what color it is. So certainly it has to have color. Certainly it has to be made of material, but it doesn't matter which material, and it doesn't matter what color. It's still going to be a chair. What should it be made of? Why is it made of whatever, of plastic or of metal, right? What should it be made of? Something stable, not jello, for example, and durable, not cloth. We don't want it to deteriorate after a few uses, and we want it to be stable. So these are going to be, the answer to this question is going to be determined by the formal cause and the final cause. For example, if our final cause is that we provide seating for a classroom, and a formal cause is going to be a description of the chair as stable and durable, it's going to need to be made of something like metal or plastic or wood, and not jello or cloth. The material cause is that out of which a thing comes to be and which persists. What is it made of? That is the main question. What is it made of? Now, how will it be made? This is what we ask next. We know what its purpose is, what its shape is, and what it's made of. Its final cause, its formal cause, and its material cause. But now we need to ask, how are we actually going to get these? How are we going to make them, and how are we going to get them in the classroom? How will it be made, and how will I obtain them? This is another question asking why. Why does it exist? The efficient cause is the primary source of something's change, or remaining as it is. How is it created? Who created it? What maintains it? For example, I ordered it from Amazon. That's how I got it, and that's how I got it in the classroom. Or I could hire a wood craftsman. I hire somebody to build it for me. Okay, so the craftsman is an efficient cause. Or Amazon.com is an efficient cause. Another example, the chairs are moved into the classroom by delivery people. So their location is caused by delivery people. Another example, the chairs maintain their structure due to the stability of the metal they are made of, and they're being used gently. So the efficient cause asks about why something changes or why something does not change. Why is it stable? Why does it maintain stability? Well, it maintains stability because of the durability of the metal and the plastic, and because it is cared for in a gentle way. It is not thrown around roughly. So, our four causes are the material cause, the formal cause, the efficient cause, and the final cause. Aristotle rightly says that you need all four of these causes, and only these causes, to analyze the existence of something. So these four causes represent the exhaustive ways in which we can analyze something in reality. You can investigate anything with these four causes. Let's look at some examples. Our object of inquiry right now is a nation. For the material cause, we might say people or citizens. The citizens are the material of the nation. The formal cause may be, in terms of essential attributes, the government or the laws. Maybe the land, but then again, a nation can move. There used to be nomadic nations. Nomads were not attached to a certain geographical location. They would follow a herd of cattle around, or they would move from place to place, and they were still a nation. So the nation is primarily its people. In terms of matter, its material cause is the people, at least the citizens, the people who are considered rightly part of this nation. Immigrants or visitors or illegal aliens, or those many people may come to visit but are not considered actually part of the nation. Right? That's the material cause. And in the formal cause, how do these people organize themselves? What is it that makes them a nation and not just a family or a group of strangers gathered together? What makes them a nation? Well, some sort of government or laws. Accidental properties of the formal cause might be the population size. Okay, it doesn't matter if this is 1,000 people or 1,000,000 people or 1,000,000,000 people. Okay, it could still be a nation. Perhaps there's a minimum amount of size, like if it is less than 100, it might be difficult to call it a nation. It's probably still more like a family or a village. So there might be some confines on this, but population size is not exactly an essential property about the nation. Ethnic diversity. Is this a nation of all one race, or is it a mix of lots of different kinds of immigrants who have come together from different countries to form a new nation? That could be the case. Either way, it's still a nation. And the division of states. How are these people divided up exactly? Are they divided up into states or provinces? Are they divided up into counties and cities? How exactly is it divided up? Well, that doesn't necessarily matter. It's still going to be considered a nation. Now for the efficient cause, for the maintenance of it continuing as a nation, you're going to have continuing citizen cooperation, and you're going to have some kind of economic stability. Otherwise, this nation will not be able to support itself, and it will go out of existence for either of these reasons. Or you could also have, for example, as an efficient cause of a nation beginning, you could have a civil war that leads to a revolution, and so a new country, a new nation is formed. The final cause of a nation is to encourage human flourishing. So you have an individual who grows a family, and a family eventually grows into a clan or a village, and eventually this growth gets to the point where you will need something like government in order to settle disputes and encourage human flourishing. So we can accomplish more together than we can apart. For example, if each individual family was a completely separate entity, then each family would need its own farm and would spend most of its time just trying to survive and gather food and protect itself from outside hostilities. But together as a nation, we can encourage more human flourishing by having some people do farm work, and some people can go get an education. Some people can go do different kinds of things. More kinds of opportunity arise from a nation. So a nation is for the purpose of encouraging human flourishing, such as freedom and protection, economy, and education. These things become more possible at the national level. All right, let's look at something else. What about a school? What about the school that you are attending right now through this class? The object of inquiry is a school. 4 causes. Material cause is going to be the people, the teachers, the faculty, the staff, students as well. Formal cause. Essential is going to be administrative policies. This is what organizes this group of people into something like a school. This is not just a group of people who are gathered together randomly to talk, but they're organized. They're organized by administrative policies into classes, and they have some kind of curriculum and certification that qualifies it as being an institution like a school. Accidental, the number of buildings. In fact, it doesn't even have to have any building, especially today as more and more classes and institutions go online. Having a physical presence doesn't even necessarily have to be part of the essential form of a school. The efficient cause. What maintains the existence of the school? All right. So teaching. Teaching has to continue. If that stops, then it's not really a school anymore. Students attending. If there's no students, then it's not really a school. Organization. There needs to continue to be an organization of classes and curriculum, things like these. These activities need to continue in order to maintain the existence of the school. If they stop, then they won't. The final cause is, of course, to educate people. And that's the one that determines all the rest. Let's look at a different kind of object of inquiry. We have a sheet of paper, which is a before, and then we fold it into a paper airplane, an after. All right, let's look at this event and see how it analyzes with the 4 causes. In terms of material cause, all right, we were asking, like with the pre-Socratics, what persists through change? A change has been made to this sheet of paper, and what persists is the paper. It's made of paper, or even more fundamentally, it's made of wood, right? This persists through change. Heraclitus, back in the pre-Socratics video, we talked about how Heraclitus said that you cannot step in the same river twice. This is because he reduced all identity to material. And the material of a river changes, but its form stays the same. And so, but the form is what is properly called the river, not so much the material that it's made of. The same would be true of your physical body, of your self, for example. Because I've heard that every 7 years, all of the molecules in your body have changed, but you're still you because they're still the same form, even if the material is continually changing. Let's talk about this paper and the paper airplane. Here's a situation where we have an object that does change. Okay, so the essential attributes of a sheet of paper is that it's flat and you can write on it. It doesn't matter what color it is, or whether or not it has lines, it's still a sheet of paper. Now for an airplane, it's going to have wings and it can fly. That's essential. Accidental, non-essential properties might be the exact number of folds. All right? There's different ways to make a paper airplane, and however you make your paper airplane might be different than how I make mine, but in any case, it's still a paper airplane. So here we have the material which persists through change, but now we have a new object. Before, we did not have an airplane. Now, we do have an airplane. We have something, in one sense, in the formal sense, we have something new. We have something now which we did not have before. Something new has come into existence. But in another sense, the material sense, we have nothing new. We still have paper. So we want to make sure to distinguish between these two causes, because this will help solve a lot of confusion. A lot of times people may say that everything is purely material and there's nothing besides material, and so therefore everything that we call identity is just make-believe, just invented. But that's not the case. There actually is a sheet of paper here, and then after I fold it, there actually is an airplane here. This is an airplane. There's something new that I have now that I did not have before. And of course, I invented this paper airplane, but it could be anything, any object, any word in our language is a form. Every single word in our language is a form and refers to an object. It refers to a form, even if it does not always refer to material. Let's talk about the efficient cause. Maybe a factory created this piece of paper. I took a bunch of sawdust and some glue, pressed it into thin sheets of paper. The paper airplane, the efficient cause was me. I folded a sheet of paper into an airplane, so I was the efficient cause. The final cause, the purpose of a sheet of paper is to write notes on it. That's what it's made for. That's ultimately what all of these other causes are pointed towards producing something I can write on. But there's a different final cause for the airplane. It's to fly. You want to fold it into something that can fly. Let's try another investigation. How about choosing to go to work? So this is a choice. For a choice, how do the four causes analyze a choice? This is going to be an interesting one, especially for ethics. Very important for ethics. The final cause is the intention of the choice. Okay, what is the purpose of my choosing at all? Well, my purpose is to get to work. So the thing that I choose is my purpose, to get to work. That's what I chose. I chose to go to work rather than to stay home. The formal cause for a choice is going to have some overlap, right? The essential attributes of the formal cause are going to be successfully getting to work. This is very similar to the final cause. In fact, in most cases, you can simply draw an equal sign between the final cause and the formal cause for a choice, because the formal cause is the object that is chosen, and the final cause is the intent to gain that object. So the object is obtaining that object, namely getting to work, is my purpose, and the getting to work, the actual getting to work, successfully getting that, namely arrival at work, that's the formal cause of the thing that I have chosen. That's the object that is chosen. Alright, now what if I get in a car accident? Bang! An accidental cause within the form is how I might choose to get to work. A taxi or drive myself, it doesn't matter, I would still be getting to work. Or the particular route. I could go on the freeway, I could go on surface street, it doesn't matter. Or it could take me an hour, or it could take me 2 times. 2 times that length, right? 2 hours. And it doesn't matter, I'm still getting to work. And, of course, if I bump into another car, this was not an essential attribute of getting to work. Bumping into a car is not an essential attribute of getting to work. All right? It is an accidental attribute. It could happen or it could not happen. And either way, my purpose is still to get to work. I did not choose to bump into another car. It is an accidental property of the thing that I have chosen. This is why it's called a car accident. It's not called a car purpose, because it's not the purpose of the car. It is an accidental quality of the choice that I have made. I chose to go to work, and a non-essential attribute of that choice is whether or not along the way I bump into another car. Car accident. All right, it's unintentional. It is literally outside the object of inquiry. Right? I intend to get to work, and this is outside of that intention. Therefore, it is accidental. That's why it's called a car accident. The material of the choice is that choosing is a type of action, an action of the will. All right, so a choice, the material that a choice is made of is an act of the will. Rather abstract. And then the efficient cause is, of course, the will, which produces that action. But to dig a little bit deeper, let's investigate the actual car accident. So our object of inquiry shifts a little bit. Instead of being the choice to go to work, now it's the car accident itself. All right? Investigating the 4 causes, the material is going to be easy. The cars and the drivers. All right? The car accident is made of cars and drivers. Formal essential attributes are that 2 cars collided. All right? I guess we can have an essential attribute of just 1 car collided, because a car could collide into a building. But just for the sake of argument, in this situation, 2 cars collide. Okay, but it could have been 3 cars, and that would have been an accidental quality. Another accidental quality would be whether the drivers were male or female. Doesn't matter, because it's still a collision. One of them could have been chewing gum, and that doesn't matter for it being a car accident. What color are the cars? What kinds of cars? It doesn't matter. That's an accidental property to the object of inquiry. The object of inquiry is the car accident. And so when we are investigating car accident and we ask, what is it made of? The answer is going to be the material cause, cars and drivers. When we investigate car accident and we ask, what is it? Ultimately, what is it? What is the thing that we're inquiring about, the object? Well, that's going to be the formal cause. It's a car accident. So it has to have cars, at least 1 car, and it has to be some kind of collision. Now, what's the efficient cause? Why did this thing happen? Because, say, for example, a driver was texting, wasn't paying attention, so he changed lanes without realizing it and crashed into somebody. Or maybe the roads were wet, right? Brakes didn't work, something like that. 1 car had faulty brakes. These are possible efficient causes. A final cause would be that the 2 cars collided. Okay, so for an event, the final cause is going to be very similar or possibly even identical to the formal cause. Because an event is the description of, when we ask, what is it? We say 2 cars collided. When we ask, why did this happen? We might be referring to efficient cause, which is to say somebody was texting or weather conditions. Or we might say, what is the nature of a car accident? See, this is a more abstract aspect of the final cause. All right. What is the nature? Why did it happen? What is the nature of a car accident? Namely, that 2 cars collide. Alright, let's carry this discussion into Aristotle's Metaphysics, just briefly. In Aristotle's Metaphysics, he begins with the now famous line, "All men by nature desire to know." There are two main types of knowledge. Theoretical, which seeks truth as its object, and practical, which seeks action. Two types of knowledge. Both are needed. Theoretical knowledge without experience or application fails to embody the truth. For example, a doctor who knows theory but actually fails to cure people. Practical knowledge without theoretical is blind. For example, Aristotle likens them to animals who act and react without knowing why. Why is the primary investigation of theoretical knowledge, a sufficient understanding of which will produce practical knowledge as well. So theoretical knowledge is more important. Why investigates the four causes applied to anything? Theoretical knowledge is more important because knowing truth will include how it is to be applied in action. That's usually the case. Truth is higher than mere action because it leads to action. But action does not always imply a knowledge of truth. The philosopher, the lover of wisdom, will seek truth above all things, and for its own sake. For in knowing truth, the philosopher gains not just action, but knowledge of causes. Aristotle briefly lists the four causes from his Physics, which constitute the full knowledge of something. To demonstrate the need for all four causes, Aristotle recounts the history of philosophy so far. The pre-Socratics asked why things change and what preserves through change. When a person learns a skill, he has changed, but something has remained the same. What is it? These thinkers are trying to make sense of change that is all around them in the world. Plants grow, water runs down river, fire burns, the wind brings weather. Many of Aristotle's predecessors supposed that the main substance that preserved through change, the most basic substance of the universe, was one of the four classical elements, prime matter, such as water, fire, air, or earth. Others thought the main substance of reality was number, or the boundless, or something else a little bit more abstract. This approximates Aristotle's material cause. So they were trying to investigate the material cause. What's the material, the substratum of which the world is made of? The pre-Socratics also asked why and how things change, and whether change is real or an illusion. Some said the substance material cause gave rise to change by its own nature. Eventually, they saw that there were two causes, the material cause and the efficient cause. The efficient cause is that which causes motion, activity, or stability. Some pre-Socratics said that nothing preserves through change. Heraclitus, for example, said, "You can't step in the same river twice." So he may have posed a material cause and an efficient cause, but nothing really still preserves in terms of identity. Plato acknowledged the necessity of the formal cause, which is the third cause, due to his background in Pythagorean math. Numbers, concepts, and words are identities independent of change. So the river may continue to flow, it may freeze over, it is still the same river. Or we may have 3 apples, we may have 3 oranges, but the identity of the concept 3 does not change. Words do not change. A particular apple may go rotten. It may be eaten, but the concept of apple stays the same. This is the formal cause, the identity of these things. And these are universals. These are something above and beyond material cause, something distinct from merely the matter that an apple is made of. Plato affirmed the theory of all 4 causes, but reduced them to form and matter only. At this point, definition of any of the 4 causes was still vague and unclear. Aristotle saw the necessity of form as distinguishing concepts from matter and change. All right, so Plato had presented everything in terms of an intelligible realm and a sensible realm, which is really just to say he distinguished between the realm of the forms and the material world. So that the forms, there was form and there was matter, but he said that matter arose naturally out of form as it was, insofar as it was distant from the most general and universal form, which is the good. So no efficient cause was necessary because everything was simply a projection by degree from the highest of the forms. And because there were such high forms and they were considered transcendent, forms in Plato were considered separate entities from matter. They can be present in matter, and matter can participate in certain forms. However, matter is still distinct from form. That is not going to be the same for Aristotle. Aristotle also saw that change was regular, such as in laws of nature, right? There's a pattern that we can observe, a consistency that we can expect. The universe is orderly, and objects have a tendency to follow their natures. He's leading up to the fourth cause here. For example, rocks fall, seeds grow into trees, animals hunt to eat, people seek the flourishing life, right? There seems to be nature and order here. What is this order? He saw that it was impossible to leave out the final cause, all right? This is the order of the universe. Things tend to follow this order. This is the purpose of things as they change. That their purpose is to follow this order, the laws of nature, in some sense. Aristotle says that for the sake of which actions and changes and movements take place, they, the pre-Socratics and Plato, assert to be a cause in a way, but not in this way, i.e. not in the way in which it is its nature to be a cause. So in other words, the four causes were vaguely defined and conjectured about before Aristotle, but Aristotle, for the first time, comes up with a precise definition of the final cause, of all of the four causes, especially the final cause, as I've been presenting them in this video. By tracing the steps of the discovery of the four causes, Aristotle presents a kind of reductio ad absurdum, where sacrificing any of the four causes leads to absurdities, such as the denial of motion or change, the denial of order in the universe, the denial of identity, or the denial of the material universe. In order to make sense of reality, all four causes must be maintained. Aristotle concludes all these thinkers, then, as they cannot pitch on another cause, seem to testify that we have determined rightly both how many and of what sort the causes are. So he affirms the people who have gone before him as correctly identifying the four causes, even if no one particular person had as of yet collected all four and said all four are equally essential. Many have thus called Aristotle the father of science, because collecting these four causes into a way that it can be used as a science is attributed first to Aristotle. Aristotle now uses these four causes to as a science. These four causes are the foundation of different kinds of sciences, the different aspects of philosophy, even natural philosophy, which develops into the natural sciences. Modern natural science seldom explicitly refers to the four causes, but it is built upon and assumes them nonetheless, all four of them. Let's compare Plato and Aristotle. In terms of the forms, both agree that forms are universal ideas that define objects and persist through change, or are common among many particular objects. So chair, the idea of chair is a form. It is present in multiple different particular objects. However, um, Plato saw forms as essentially separate, and Aristotle saw them as essentially within the objects themselves. So in terms of metaphysics, Plato proposed the divided line, where there's two independent realms of form and matter. There's the realm of the forms, and there's the material world. Look at my lecture on Plato to provide some detail on his divided line theory. And then Aristotle proposed what has been called hylomorphism, which is to say that objects are form and matter. All objects are composed of form and matter, which are inseparable. Forms exist in matter and not an independent reality. So when you see a pattern, you see three pieces of furniture, and they are all stable, and they are all meant for one individual. We can say that we can name the pattern, and the pattern is named chair, and that pattern is in those things. That pattern, we can now go and talk about that pattern by itself without talking about the particular objects. But at the same time, if there are no particular objects, then there's no pattern. We can imagine it, but it doesn't exist anymore. That is what Aristotle's difference of opinion was about the nature of form. Now, in terms of epistemology, Plato said that contemplation through remembering innate knowledge transcends to the good. So the most important pieces of information, the most important knowledge of universal forms comes through mere contemplation. Contemplation dependent upon innate knowledge. Aristotle says we have innate logic, but this allows induction leading to deduction. We'll detail this later in this same video. So hold on. In terms of metaethics, both propose happiness or eudaimonia as human flourishing, which human flourishing is accomplished by living virtuously. Virtue was a major emphasis for both Plato and Aristotle, and this fulfills the human rational nature. In terms of growth in virtue, Plato said contemplation was enough. Knowledge of the virtues was enough to produce the action of being virtuous. But for Aristotle, he said habit. You can know about a virtue, but that's not enough. You have to practice it enough until it becomes a habit. Then it is internalized as an internal disposition to act in a certain way. It becomes a character trait that you have. You don't just know virtue, you have virtue. For more on that, see my video on Aristotle's ethics. Now, in reference to the soul, Plato says that the soul is the form of the body. And since forms have their own existence in the realm of the forms separate from matter, he says that the soul is immortal. It existed before it was attached to the physical body, and it continues to exist afterwards. So the soul existed in the realm of the forms and knew everything. And when it became incarnated and attached to a body, all knowledge is remembrance of the time before when it used to exist in the realm of the forms. And after death, it returns to that realm. Aristotle also agrees that the soul is the form of the body, but in his view, form is always attached to matter, and form cannot exist separate from matter. Therefore, if the soul is the form of the body, when the body dies, the soul, or the form, is gone as well. In a similar way that if I see a pattern between three chairs, if the chairs cease to exist, the pattern is also gone. Whereas for Plato, the pattern continues to exist. The soul continues to exist. Now let's talk about Aristotle's Epistemology. Just a brief introduction. Aristotle discovered and developed the field of logic in a way it had not been done before. The key question: how do we gain the most certain justification for beliefs? If we are philosophers and we love wisdom, we love truth, we love knowledge, how do we gain true knowledge? How do we gain the most solid justification? All right? We want to make sure that what we believe is correct. How do we gain that kind of certainty, that kind of justification? Well, first we need to know that knowledge is justified true belief. We continue to function on that definition as a handy little definition of knowledge. All right, so Aristotle rejects Plato's theory of remembrance of innate knowledge. He says that there's no way Plato's theory of remembrance can account for all of the different kinds of knowledge that we have. That being said, he does affirm that there's some small amount that is correct in that theory. Aristotle also rejects the opposite idea, which is tabula rasa, which is to say a blank slate. So on the one hand, we have Plato saying you already know everything, you just need help remembering. And then tabula rasa, a famous example of this is going to be John Locke in the Enlightenment. Tabula rasa says that you're born knowing absolutely nothing. You're a completely blank slate, and you're a canvas on which your experiences paint pictures, paint knowledge. So knowledge comes through observation alone. There's a problem with this, according to Aristotle. Knowledge starts with observation and sense data. That's true for Aristotle. However, Aristotle says that observation itself requires innate knowledge of logic. Mere observation does not mean learning. So take sight, for example. You can point a camera at something. A camera can see many things happen, but a camera does not learn. If that camera is a person, however, and a person sees, and the person has at least enough innate knowledge of logic to be able to collect this sense data into an experience and learn something from this sense data, all of that learning depends upon an innate knowledge of logic. So mere observation is not quite enough. You need to have innate knowledge of logic in order to be able to turn observation into knowledge. Aristotle is a sort of middle point between Plato and tabula rasa. Universals or forms are in particular objects and shared among them rather than being transcendent realities, as in Plato's realm of the forms. But how do we gain certain knowledge? Let's look at the structure of an argument. If you have watched my critical thinking videos, some of this will be recap. An argument has three main parts. It has premises or assumptions, and an argument is built upon this. And then you have the argumentative steps that eventually lead to the conclusion itself. In parentheses, we have some symbols here. Here's an example. Premise 1. Every change or effect has a cause. This is a statement of the principle of sufficient reason. Premise 2. If the Big Bang happened, it was a change. Step number 1. If every change has a cause, then we can trace cause and effect like a chain or dominoes. Step 2. If change is a chain of cause and effect, then there must be a first cause that started the chain, or a first domino that was knocked over. Number 3. If the Big Bang was a change, it has a cause. Number 4. By definition, the first cause must be something that never changes and always exists. In conclusion, a first cause exists. This is actually an argument that is similar to one that Aristotle himself proposes, because he is the first to mention something called a first cause as he investigates his efficient cause. If efficient cause is an aspect of reality, there must be some first efficient cause. A question for further research might be whether or not this first cause is something like God. Of course, Aristotle, in his polytheism of ancient Greece, is going to have a different answer than, say, a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or even an atheist. All right, but the question is whether or not those different answers, which one of those answers has the most reason behind them. But we want to talk about valid versus sound. Aristotle distinguishes between these two aspects of an argument. Valid is to say that argumentative steps don't break the laws of logic. So it's logically good, logically consistent, aka they don't contain any logical fallacies. So this argument here hopefully does not contain any logical fallacies. Alright, so validity points to just the middle section, just one of the three aspects of an argument. So no logical flaws come in the argument itself, in the argumentative process. However, sound, when an argument is sound, it is something more than valid. It also has true premises. Someone can have an airtight logical argument, but at the end of the day, they started from a poor assumption. But if you do have true assumptions and a logical argument, then you have a sound argument. And this is the kind of argument that Aristotle is trying to find. How do we know if we're having a sound argument? This is going to depend on having true premises. So how can we be most certain that our assumptions are true? What are the most certain assumptions? What are the first assumptions, the first premises? Because every premise for an argument can be challenged. And when it is challenged, it will have to become the conclusion of a prior argument. And back we go. There's only so far you can go until you get to a point where your assumptions cannot be proven. For example, the existence of causality. You cannot prove the existence of causality. You can show through effect that denying one aspect of causality will lead to absurd conclusions, but that's not the same as proving it. That is showing that it must be true. So how do we gain these strong premises? First, we have logic, according to Aristotle, which we all know just in virtue of our being rational creatures. We are born as rational creatures, and reason necessarily knows logic. Even if you're not fully aware of what the logical principles are, you do not know that you know, still, even for a small child knows logic. They know that they are either eating candy or they are not eating candy. They know causality. They know that if they cry, that will be an efficient cause for gaining food or whatever they want. Right? This is an efficient cause. They will not be able to name it an efficient cause, but they know that causality is real. They know this from birth, in virtue of being rational. Because we know this, we can have observation, sensory data of particulars. That's a particular chair over there, and over there there's another particular chair, and together we have 5 chairs. All right, this is just raw data at this point. And we can organize this data through logic into induction. This observes a pattern. There's a pattern between these 5 objects that I'm going to call chair. This is an understanding of forms. And then we use these forms as the most certain premises. All right, logic helps us organize observation into the process of induction, where we produce some basic forms, such as mathematical objects like numbers and triangles, right? These are the most certain premises and forms. But then once we know things like numbers and triangles, or even chairs, we can use deduction to relate forms to each other. We can go away from the objects. So I no longer see chairs in front of me. I no longer see 5 apples in front of me. I just go into a dark room and I think about the number 5. I think about different numbers, and through deduction I can combine forms in different ways through the use of logic to develop further conclusions. So the first piece of information comes through observation. But once I've learned a few things, I can combine those things in different ways with deduction to learn other things. That's the learning process according to Aristotle. What counts, but we will want to know what counts as certain. When we're trying to have certain premises, are you absolutely sure that a triangle has 3 sides? Are you absolutely sure that the physical world exists? Are you absolutely sure that you were born? I mean, what level of certainty is called certain? There's different answers to this. So in Aristotle, if you have very compelling justification for the belief in something, so much so that you would be a fool to believe otherwise, you would have to be obviously irrational to believe something different, that's compelling justification. You have a very good reason to believe this. So it would be wise for you to believe this, and it would be foolish for you to not believe this. That is different than absolute logical certainty. Aristotle said that there are only a very few kinds of things that have absolute certainty. For example, I am absolutely certain that a triangle has 3 sides because that is the very definition of a triangle. Those two concepts are actually just the same concept. I am absolutely certain that 2 plus 2 equals 4. I am absolutely certain that a bachelor is an unmarried man because that's the very definition of a bachelor. Those are the same thing. Very few things have absolute certainty, right? And not even very useful kinds of things. But based on some of those kinds of things, we can use induction and deduction to develop further things, further pieces of knowledge with compelling justification. Right? This compelling justification is not the same as logical positivism. Logical positivism is a philosophy that is introduced very late, as it is really only just over maybe 100 years old. In the 20th century, it is codified by, for example, A.J. Ayer is a good example of logical positivism, and the others in the Vienna Circle. Logical positivism says that you should not believe anything unless you can prove it with absolute certainty. However, this leads to skepticism because it becomes evident that you cannot prove very much with absolute certainty. You can prove it with compelling justification, which is to say, so much justification that it would be a fool to believe otherwise. But absolute certainty, if that is your criteria for knowledge, then you will know almost nothing. You will know very little. Very little can be known, and so this is going to lead to skepticism and eventually even nihilism or anti-realism to some degree. We'll see that through the rest of this course, however. Let's talk a little bit more about deduction versus induction. Deduction says deduction is a method of reasoning where the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises. For example, a bachelor is an unmarried man, all right? That's just a definition. Socrates is an unmarried man, therefore Socrates is a bachelor, right? This conclusion has to follow from these premises. There's no way around it. There's no fault in this. There's no possibility, all right? This particular argument is organized in the structure called a syllogism, which is the simplest form of an argument. Socrates was born in Athens. Athens is in Greece. Socrates was born in Greece. All right, deduction. This conclusion has to come from these premises without fail. Induction is the observation of patterns, and what usually happens, it can fail. All right. Aristotle says the best premises come from self-evident principles, something that is true by definition, and through induction. An example of induction might be that every time I've gone into a grocery store before, if I want ice cream, I should go to the freezer section, which is usually towards the edge or near the wall. It's usually not in the middle of the store. So I go into a new grocery store that I've never been in before, and I'm looking for ice cream. I head towards the wall expecting there to be a freezer section. This is a rule of thumb. This usually happens. This is the pattern. This is induction. However, I get over to the wall and I find that there's no ice cream over there. There's no freezer section. The freezer section is in the middle of the store, and this breaks the pattern. All right, it can be wrong. My induction can be wrong. However, it depends on what kind of thing is being observed. Right? Some things are more certain patterns. For example, gravity. I know that if I throw an apple up in the air, it's going to fall back down. I do not know that with absolute logical certainty based on deduction. I know that with compelling justification based on induction. I have seen an apple fall so many times, and I have reason to believe, I have good, compelling reason to believe that when I throw an apple up in the air, it will fall back down. I do not have 100% logical certainty, but I would be a fool to believe otherwise. That being said, I know that if for some reason I do throw the apple up in the air and it does not fall back down, because of my very reliable information that I have through induction, I can start to look for other causes. It was not a random event. There had to have been something that stopped it from falling. Perhaps somebody grabbed it, snatched it mid-air before it fell down, or something like this. Now let's do the write-up. Explain an event that happened this week in your life using all four causes. Aristotle said that the efficient cause points to a chain of cause and effect extending back to the first cause, an uncaused cause that, by definition, must exist. That's to say, it's necessary. What do you think this is? We'll actually talk about this a little bit more when we get to the medieval thinkers. Be sure to see my critical thinking videos. The logic presented there was developed by Aristotle. So there was a lot of overlap between this video and those in terms of some of the concepts because Aristotle developed logic, or discovered logic rather, and codified many of the things presented in that critical thinking video.